You want to change your life? Do you guys really want to accomplish your dreams on this planet? Do this one thing. We all have patterns for how we deal with uncomfortable and negative situations and people. Do any of you, by show of hands, recognize that you have a pattern of behavior and thoughts when it comes to the big challenges in your life and when you're dealing with a negative person or circumstance? There's a pattern, right? It's humbling. That's why I love watching the Matrix movies once a year, because in the Matrix movies, they talk about like us all being programmed. And there's an element to that which seems to be true, that there is a program running about Todd, about Graham, about Eric, about Nathan, right, as individuals. And we're going through this life, we're trying our best, and we're trying to break free of some of these negative patterns. And that's what growth is. That's why it takes both willpower and surrender to break free. But we run up against ourselves. We run up against this invisible wall, and we find ourselves doing the same thing over and over again, even when we know it doesn't help us or the other people in the situation. And then you lie in bed at night and you're like, what the fuck am I doing? I know this game. There's a moment in the Matrix movies. Has everyone seen the Matrix movies on this call? Okay, most of you have seen it. There's a moment that I just love in the Matrix movies, where in the first movie, where Neo, what's his name, Keanu Reeves, is getting in the limo with Trinity to go see Morpheus. And then he gets freaked out, because he's like, oh, I can't do this. This is too much. And he gets out of the limo and he looks down this road, and it's like this rainy road. And she says, don't go down that road. You know that road. You've been down that road before, right? And he looks down, he's like, yeah, that's the boredom. That's the stress. Take a risk to be great. Take a risk to go into the unknown. And the biggest risk that we have of going into the unknown in the real world is examining the beliefs and subconscious behaviors and thought patterns that we have, particularly around things that we perceive to be negative. This is very, very delicate and hard work to do, but I'm going to make a supposition tonight that for the warriors and kings that are able to develop the patience and resilience to look at the internal mechanism of how you deal with these patterns, freedom is at bay. This is freedom, to be able to actually look at how you deal with these situations and people, and to be able to do something differently than you normally do, i.e. breaking the pattern. So let's just get the obvious out of the way, right? So there are negative situations, there are negative people in your lives. We all have them, right? And maybe depending on how much work you've done on yourself, it's not like it used to be, but you still find that there's going to be these little twinges, that is just like so obvious that you just can't deal with that. And this anger, this rage, this depression, this confusion, this regression comes up. It's almost like a wave of energy that comes up. And then you act in a way that doesn't represent your best self. Anybody? Does that ring a bell in anybody? Sometimes it's a massively strong wave, right? Sometimes you don't have to think about it too much. It's like you're a big fuck you to the universe. You're a big fuck you to that person in that situation. And actually you don't care. And you're actually really proud about it. Well, that's a different circumstance, right? Because the first thing that we need to do, brothers, is we need to be willing to see ourselves and see the situation differently if we're going to change the outcome. The definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. So the way that we combat that, to be sane, is to not do the same thing over and over again, so that we can expect different results. So what I want to share tonight is a little bit deep, and we're going to go into breakouts shortly. You guys are going to go into groups. You're going to talk about this as well. But the key thing to understand that I want to get across, and this is really advanced stuff, is that the people and situations that are stressful for you, that are negative to you, are just concepts. They're concepts in the world that are being created by your mind, as is everything in life. This is what all the great wisdom traditions talk about. And if you're able just to look at it that way for a moment, even if that's hard for you to grasp, but even just for fun, Like everything is going on in your mind. You have these thoughts, you have these ideas, you have these feelings. It's being perpetrated from the inner that's making stories about the outer. And when you look at it that way, you can see that in some sense, you have some responsibility for how you are perceiving these negative people and negative circumstances. That makes sense, guys. Does anyone have a huge problem with that? Is anyone like, no, no, no? Anyone? And it's fine to do that if you want to. Okay. And don't be bashful, guys. Like, this could be a conversation too. All right. But like the fact that we take responsibility for the men in our groups as kings for our experience of life. Our perceptions are our own. This is the inner dominion. This is the inner kingdom that all the great saints like Jesus talked about, that we have an inner dominion, a secret place within us that is our own. They're our perceptions. It's how we perceive the world around us. And that is ours. That is our responsibility, which means that we have the ability to change it if we wish. And I believe that we in this call wish to change that. Okay, but step one needs to be a recognition that you have the power to change it. You have to believe it. And the way that we do that is first to create the spaciousness in your own mind to understand that the people and situations that drive you nuts, that trigger the hell out of you, are in some sense objective. They're just stimuli in an external universe that you are perceiving as negative, hurtful, painful. It's huge. It's huge to understand that, because it is my belief that understanding that is freedom. Once you understand that, you can then begin to play with it. Now, years ago, I'm going to tell you a little story. And to understand and to practice this is a lifelong process. We're always learning how to do this. Okay, this is obvious, right? But I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey, because I had a relationship with my parents. I still have a relationship with my dad. My mom passed, but that was, tumultuous. It was this rocky relationship, particularly with my mom. And I used to be able to sit here and tell you all these reasons why she was so fucked up. I love my mom, but, in a lot of ways, it was a tumultuous relationship. Until I did this 7-day deep dive retreat years back called the Hoffman Process, which was designed to deal with mommy and daddy issues. And it was in that process, I did it about 10 years ago, that I really was able to get a visceral experience how my own perceptions of my parents were driving my behaviors. And it actually wasn't anything to do with them. Because when I say it here, it's just words. But when you get off this line and you go back and your wife drives you nuts about something and this rage comes up and you want to tear down the house, or something happens with work and you want to just retreat, not deal with it, and feel really down and depressed around it, we all have different ways of dealing with it. It was impossible to change. So we talk about it, but then we go and practice. And in Hoffman, I was able to get such a visceral understanding of this, which now I believe can be conveyed here, now, by the way. You don't need to go do some 7-day retreat. I think that in the evolution of consciousness, we now can have this information come across very easily on Zoom calls, right? But my relationship changed with my parents. And it wasn't my relationship change, my thoughts about them changed. I was able to have empathy in my heart for my mom. I never had empathy in my heart for my mom. When something happened, I was able to see in that moment where I would usually get triggered, I was able to see, man, this is just a woman who's really struggling right now. She's in pain. She's suffering. And she doesn't have the tools to deal with it. I'm learning tools to deal with it, but she doesn't have any. And I would watch. I would watch her and I wouldn't say anything. And this is when I learned the power of this practice that we want to talk about tonight, which is becoming the witness in the situation. This is one of the core things that we practice in Man for Man. It's a very key thing to practice. And that is becoming the witness, becoming the observer in a situation. Because what I started doing was things would happen in the external world with my parents and I wouldn't react. What would normally cause a huge fight, I would just sit there and I would actually be thinking about how much pain she was in. And she didn't know what to do with it. It was almost like I created a blip in the matrix for her reality, where it was almost like the usual story, the usual pattern that was between us was not happening. I had removed my pin from it. And she was left by herself, kind of like, huh. Okay. Does it make sense, guys? Now, what happened was, over time, she changed, meaning that she would do different things, or that trigger wasn't firing in the way that satisfied her previously. So she would change her behavior. This is what happens when you do this work. When you change yourself, other people change. It's like the greatest magic trick of all time. And it's real. And it proves and shows that we have so much power over the circumstances in our lives when we really just look inner to our own perceptions, when we really just examine and change our own consciousness around how we're dealing with the situations change. This became so obvious, guys, that my sister, who was a part of this, right? Families are all meshed up in this weird freaking way, like would watch and not understand how all of a sudden my mom and I have this amazingly beautiful flowing relationship. All of a sudden, it just became about love and appreciation. Because that's all I was feeling in my heart for her. And eventually she would reflect that back at me. And my sister, who was on the side observing us, was like, what the fuck? Like, what are you doing? Like, I don't have that. Like, why aren't you getting angry at her? Like, she did this. Like, you know what? You know, why are you not X, Y, Z? And you know what I did? I applied the same philosophy and the same practices with my sister that I did for her. I said, no, I understand, you know, because there was something about her that wanted to feel the same pain and struggle, right? Because there's something about being human where we almost get drawn into the pain. There's a part of us that just wants to go into this like suffering, like sad, depressed, angry, rage modality. It takes real courage to break out of that. And for years, I was in the belief that maybe I shouldn't break out of it. Maybe it's actually missing the whole point. And for many years, I've told some of you guys this, I lived with this ideology that understanding my own pain and understanding my own sadness and fear and depression was very important because I needed to understand it to break out of it. And it wasn't until I understood that the only way to break out of it was to break out of it, meaning to shift my state internally around it, that I finally started to really change my character. I don't get angry anymore. I used to be a rageful fuck. You guys might not believe this, but I was fiery. And, you know, with ex-girlfriends, you know, even with my wife when I met her, you know, not the kind of guy that you'd want to like, you know, nice slice up to a point and then boom. And that really shifted. And it didn't shift. Like that part of me wasn't bad. That part of me was immature. That part of me was thriving on an energy that wasn't really serving my life. Anybody have an energy in them that isn't serving their lives, but it comes up all the time? Okay, we all do. So this practice of becoming the witness, of becoming the non-reactive observer, write that down, the non-reactive observer to the situation. Give yourself space when things are going down, when someone is triggering you, when a situation is calling up that part of yourselves that wants to either check out or go to war. Cultivate the ability to breathe and to become the observer and the witness. And in that space, people ask me this, what do I do? It's hard because at first you're going to be feeling the rage. You're going to be feeling the sadness and it's not going to have its proper outlet. You're just going to be sitting with it until either it boils over or you forget about it. Or should I heal it? What should I do? There's always questions. What should I do in that state when I'm becoming the observer? Find the empathy. Find the empathy for the situation or the person that you're dealing with. You want to change your life? Do you guys really want to accomplish your dreams on this planet? Do this one thing. Find the empathy, find the sensitivity, find the freaking love in your heart, in your body, when something that would normally trigger the hell out of you is stopped in its tracks.